Hello world. Hope you're having as much fun as I'm about to have dropping this on you. Today we're going to talk about Think and Grow Rich. It's the landmark bestseller from Napoleon Hill. Let me put it up again. Make sure you see it. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's written almost 80 years ago. Napoleon Hill was asked to do a study of about 500 other millionaires to understand what made very successful people like that and bring that information, process it, and take it to the masses so they could learn it. So here we are, Think and Grow Rich. There are many steps to taking your thoughts and taking them all the way from thoughts to imagination, getting things done, and specialized knowledge and all that. We're not going to cover all those steps today. I really want to focus on one step because it's very relevant. It especially ties into some of the other things I've already been trying to get across. So we're going to talk about organized planning, and within organized planning we're going to talk about how Napoleon Hill defined leadership. Now mind you, this is 80 years ago, but it ties into a lot of the works that are in your local bookstore today as well. So let's jump into it because we don't have a lot of time. Alright, first thing, unwavering courage. Leadership should have unwavering courage at the top of the heap. And if you think about some other things we talked about, 48 Laws of Power, we said interaction with boldness. So that was something that was talked about by Robert Greene in his work. Entering actions with boldness, and that's the kind of people that you want. People with unwavering courage. Next, we want to talk about people with self-control. And if you think about self-control, we talked about in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, we talked about different types of employees, and at the highest level is the level 5 leader. And that level 5 leader, one of the attributes that we bestowed upon that person is that they have what's called a strong professional will. They're not going to be swayed because of political pressure or some strange market opportunity or something that's going to deplete resources onto something that takes them away from the goal that they'd already set. If you also think about it, number 3, we're going to talk about someone with a keen sense of justice. What's fair? If you think about Stephen Covey, we talked about win-win when you're having your interpersonal victories, and you want a situation where people are working together because it's fair, it's right, it's good for the client, it's good for the producer, it's good for the seller, it's good for the buyer, it's good for the seller, it's good for both workers, it's good for the boss, it's good for the employee. Win-win. But also remember what was emphasized in that that kind of mentality can't exist unless the structure exists to support it. That ties into a sense of justice that Napoleon Hill talked about 80 years ago. Number 4, we're going to talk about definiteness of decision. You want to have your decision and be right because you're focused on your bottom line. Where have we heard bottom line thinking before? That's right, John C. Maxwell, How Successful People Think. We talked about being focused and knowing what your bottom line is. I'm not going to rehash the story that we used to back that up, but you remember it. It's on the other video if you've forgotten. Okay, not only do we have definiteness of decision, but we also have definiteness of plans. So we'll go back to 48 Laws of Power and with Robert Greene, and he says in 48 Laws of Power, plan all the way to the end. Not plan until you have a general idea, but he says plan all the way to the end. That was written clearly out there. We talked about that, and it ties into this. So definiteness of plans. And 80 years ago they would say, we want definiteness of plans. Now they say plan all the way to the end. It means the same thing. You have to have a stone cold tight plan so you know what's going to happen before it happens. Number 6, get into the habit of doing more than you're paid for, but you're going to go above and beyond. We talked about this, possibility thinking, and I don't know if you remember this, but one of the traits of possibility thinking is not only do you increase the possibilities in yourself, but you increase the possibilities in others because you're going beyond average. You're going beyond just what's asked of you, what the average person does. They do what's asked of them. Possibility thinkers will figure out what else can we do, how can we go beyond that. And now you're just building up people around you. So we talked about that. One thing we didn't talk about, but it is relevant, so I'm going to share it anyway. If you ever listen to Jack Welch's podcast, the Jack and Susie Welch podcast, back in maybe 2007 or so, 2006, they talked about over-delivering. So you're new on a job, you don't want to just do your job. You want to kind of give a little more, and they can always rein you back, but at least you're giving more, and they may want that after all. So number 7, we're going to talk about this. Having a pleasing personality. Sounds so simple, but it's amazing how many people at work deal with somebody who doesn't have a pleasing personality. Maybe it's you. You don't have a pleasing personality, and people have to put up with your attitude. I'll leave it at that. But remember, we talked about in 48 Laws of Power, one of the laws, number 24, play the perfect courtier. Because you're in court, think about the people years ago when the courts, all the decisions, all the key movements were made there. You had to know how to maneuver and get along with people, even if your interests and their interests didn't line up. And he lays that rule out there. Ties in the same. You gotta have a pleasing personality if you're trying to be a leader, not just an individual contributor. Next thing, practice sympathy and understanding. And Stephen Covey talks about this in the seven habits. He says, first, seek to understand, then go back and seek to be understood. But the very first thing you want to do is seek to understand the other person's position before you come up with a solution to the problem or what you perceive as a problem. So it all ties in. None of this is new yet. Not one thing I've talked to you about from this book is different than some of the other things. So it should start clicking to you. You should be able to put some of these, connect some of these dots. All right, now number 9, a mastery of detail. And that ties into strategic thinking. If you look at how successful people think, one of the things we talked about is there's an element of strategic thinking where they know what they're going to do during the day, during the week, during the month ahead, because they've already put strategies in place to address that. So they've got a lot of these details. They know what the heck is going on, and they're not winging it or saying we're directionally correct. They are correct. There's a big difference there. Number 10, willingness to assume full responsibility. We're not talking about partial responsibility. We're talking about a willingness to say, this is on my watch, it happened, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to ride with it. So that's a willingness to assume full responsibility. Again, that ties into From Good to Great. When Jim Collins did that study in his staff, they talked about level 5 leadership, but on the other side of the professional will was the personal humility. That means, hey, if something goes bad, I'm humble enough to accept it. If something is out there, I'm not going to just throw other people and let other people die on my hill. I'll die on the hill because it's my cause. And that's what we're talking about. And finally, we're going to talk about a word you've heard since kindergarten, since pre-K, since you were a toddler. Cooperation. Being able to be a leader, but you still have to be cooperative with others. And if you think about how successful people think, we talked about shared thinking. It was one of the most important levels of thinking. If you think about the 7 habits by Covey, you remember we talked about synergizing, putting all the different things together and working together to get a solution that benefits everybody. So all these things that we've talked about in earlier videos, they tie together. Remember, this is Think and Grow Rich. This is just one very small section of an overarching idea, but I just didn't have time to get it all in one video. So I really wanted to hit this with a little more detail because I figured this could be applied immediately. So levels of